My name is Lydia Hawthorne, and I never thought I'd be standing at the altar with a man my father distrusted. But here I was, my heart pounding beneath layers of white satin, ready to say, I do, to Eli Carson. You look beautiful, sweetheart, my mother, Miriam, whispered as she adjusted my veil. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, a mix of joy and something else I couldn't quite place. I smiled, pushing down the flutter of nerves in my stomach. Thanks, Mom. Is Dad ready? As if on cue, my father's weathered face appeared in the doorway. Nathaniel Hawthorne was a man of few words, but his presence filled the room. He looked at me, his expression a storm of emotions. Lydia, he said, his voice gruff. Can I have a moment alone with you? Mom nodded, squeezing my hand before slipping out. Dad approached, his steps hesitant. You're sure about this? He asked, his eyes searching mine. I forced a laugh. Dad, I'm getting married in 10 minutes. A bit late for cold feet, don't you think? He didn't smile. Instead, he took my hands in his skin rough from years of working the land. Lydia, promise me you'll always remember where you come from, he said, his voice trembling with emotion. This farm, this family, it's in your blood. A pang of unease shot through me. Dad, what's this about? You know I love the farm. It's not about the farm, sweetheart. It's about you. He paused, struggling with his words. Eli, he's different from us. I just want you to be careful. I pulled my hands away, frustration bubbling up. Different how? Because he didn't grow up on a farm? Because he has ambitions beyond Willow Creek? That's not what I meant, Dash. Then what did you mean? I snapped, immediately regretting my tone. I'm sorry, Dad. I know you're just looking out for me, but I love Eli. He makes me happy. Dad's shoulders sagged. I hope you're right, Lydia. I truly do. Before I could respond, Mom poked her head in. It's time, she said softly. Dad offered his arm, and I took it, pushing aside the doubts his words had stirred. As we walked down the aisle, I caught sight of Eli. His smile was dazzling, his eyes locked on mine. This was right, I told myself. This was my future. The ceremony passed in a blur. Before I knew it, we were at the reception, twirling on the dance floor as Mr. and Mrs. Carson. Happy Mrs. Carson, Eli murmured in my ear. I grinned up at him, ecstatic, though I think my dad might need some convincing. Eli's smile faltered for a moment. Your old man's never warmed up to me, has he? He's just protective, I said, though a small part of me wondered if there was more to it. Give him time. Time, huh? Eli's eyes drifted to where my parents stood, watching us. Well, we've got plenty of that ahead of us. A whole lifetime. As we swayed to the music, I caught my father's gaze over Eli's shoulder. The worry in his eyes made my stomach clench. I pushed the feeling aside, focusing instead on the warmth of Eli's arms around me. This was my choice, my future. Whatever doubts my father had, I was determined to prove him wrong. Eli and I would build a life together, one that would make both our families proud. But as the night wore on and we prepared to leave for our honeymoon, my father's words echoed in my mind. Remember where you come from. Little did I know then how prophetic those words would prove to be, or how much I would cling to them in the years to come. The city skyline glittered outside our apartment window, a far cry from the starlit nights back on the farm. I sighed, checking my watch. Eli was late. Again. Lydia, you there? Eli's voice crackled through my phone. Where are you? I asked, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. We were supposed to leave for my parents an hour ago. About that. Eli's tone made my stomach drop. Something came up at work. I can't make it this weekend. I closed my eyes, counting to 10. Eli, we haven't visited the farm in months. My parents are expecting us. I know, but this deal could be huge for us. You understand, right? Before I could respond, he hung up. I stared at the phone, a familiar ache settling in my chest. The next morning, I found myself alone on the familiar dirt road leading to my childhood home. As I pulled up, Dad was already waiting on the porch, his weathered face creasing into a smile. There's my girl, he said, enveloping me in a hug that smelled of hay and home. Where's Eli? I forced a smile. Work emergency. He sends his apologies. Dad's expression darkened for a moment before he masked it. Well, come on in. Your mother's been cooking up a storm. Inside, Mom fussed over me, piling my plate high with comfort food. You're too thin, she clucked. Is Eli feeding you properly in that big city? I'm fine, Mom. I laughed, but it felt hollow. How are things here? As they filled me in on farm life, I felt a pang of longing. This was my world, simple and honest. So different from the sleek, often cutthroat city life I now led. Later, as I helped Dad with the evening chores, he broached the subject I'd been dreading. Lydia, he began, his voice careful. Are you happy? I paused, a bale of hay in my arms. Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be? Dad's eyes, wise and knowing, searched mine. It's just, you seem different. And Eli, well, he's missed the last 3 visits. He's busy, Dad. His career is taking off. And yours? I bit my lip. My own job, once a source of pride, had taken a back seat to supporting Eli's ambitions. It's fine, Dad nodded, but I could see he wasn't convinced. Just remember, Lydia, you're a hawthorn. We're made of stronger stuff. That night, lying in my old bedroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I loved Eli, didn't I? But why did being here, among the familiar creaks and scents of the farmhouse, feel more like home than our sleek city apartment ever had? My phone buzzed. A text from Eli. Miss you. How's the farm? I stared at the screen, unsure how to respond. How could I explain the comfort of worn floorboards under my feet, or the satisfaction of a day's honest work? How could I convey the growing disconnect I felt between this life and the one I shared with him? In the end, I simply replied, It's good. See you tomorrow. As I drifted off to sleep, my father's words echoed in my mind. We're made of stronger stuff. I couldn't shake the feeling that I might need that strength sooner than I thought. The next morning, as I prepared to leave, Mom pressed a jar of homemade preserves into my hands. For you and Eli, she said, her eyes worried. Take care of yourself, sweetheart. I hugged them both tightly, a lump forming in my throat. As I drove away, I watched them grow smaller in my rearview mirror, standing together on the porch. They looked like pillars of strength, rooted in the land they loved. Turning onto the highway, I steeled myself for the return to city life, to Eli, and to the growing unease I could no longer ignore. Something had to change, but I wasn't sure I was ready for what that might mean. The pregnancy test trembled in my hands, 2 pink lines staring back at me. I was elated, terrified, and everything in between. Eli and I were going to be parents. Eli, I called out, my voice quivering with excitement. Can you come here? He sauntered into the bathroom, his eyes widening as he saw the test. Is that? I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. We're having a baby. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, fear, uncertainty, but it was quickly replaced by his trademark grin. Well, look at us, all grown up, he chuckled, pulling me into a hug that felt just a little too loose. As the months passed, my excitement grew along with my belly. Eli, however, seemed to retreat further into his work. I'm securing our future, he'd say when I asked him to come to doctor's appointments or help set up the nursery. The day Caleb was born was the happiest and most terrifying of my life. As I held our son, I felt a love so fierce it took my breath away. Eli stood by the hospital bed, looking more lost than I'd ever seen him. "Want to hold him?" I asked softly. Eli hesitated before taking Caleb awkwardly in his arms. "He's so small," he murmured, a hint of wonder in his voice. For a moment, I thought maybe this would be the turning point, that fatherhood would bring out a new side of Eli. But as the weeks went by, his indifference became impossible to ignore. Then came the call that shattered my world. "Lydia," my aunt's voice cracked over the phone. "There's been an accident. Your parents." The farm felt empty without them. As I stood in the kitchen where Mom had taught me to bake, where Dad had bandaged my scraped knees, The weight of their absence crushed me. Eli's hand on my shoulder startled me. "We should talk about what to do with the farm," he said, his tone businesslike. I turned to him, incredulous. "What do you mean?" "Well, we can't keep it," he said matter-of-factly. "It's not practical. We should sell it, use the money to set ourselves up in the city." His words hit me like a physical blow. "Sell it? Eli, this is my home. My heritage." "It's an asset, Lydia," he argued, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd grown to hate. "Think about Caleb's future. We could set up a college fund, buy a bigger apartment." I cradled Caleb closer to my chest, suddenly feeling very alone. "I can't just sell it, Eli. My parents' whole lives are in this land." "Were," he corrected coldly. "They're gone, Lydia. We need to think about the living." As he walked away, leaving me standing in the kitchen of my childhood home, something inside me hardened. I looked down at Caleb, peacefully sleeping in my arms, unaware of the turmoil around him. "I won't let him take this from us," I whispered to my son. "This is your legacy, too." Over the next few weeks, as we settled my parents' affairs, the rift between Eli and me grew. Every conversation seemed to circle back to selling the farm. His persistence only strengthened my resolve. One night, as I rocked Caleb to sleep in my old bedroom, I made a decision. I wouldn't sell the farm. Somehow, I'd find a way to keep it, to honor my parents' memory and give Caleb a connection to his roots. As I laid Caleb in his crib, my eyes fell on a photo of my parents on their wedding day. They looked so young, so full of hope and love. I picked up the frame, tracing their smiling faces with my finger. "I'll make you proud," I whispered. "I'll find a way to keep the farm alive." Little did I know then how that promise would change the course of my life, or the battle that lay ahead with the man I had once thought was my partner in everything. The doorbell's chime cut through the tense silence that had settled over our apartment. Eli and I had just finished another argument about the farm, his words still ringing in my ears. "You're being irrational, Lydia. That farm is a millstone around our necks." I opened the door to find a striking woman in her 50s, her silver hair cut in a sleek bob. Her eyes, sharp and assessing, reminded me of someone, but I couldn't place who. "Lydia Carson?" she asked, her voice crisp. I nodded, confused. "I'm Judith Blackwood, Eli's aunt." My eyes widened. Eli had rarely mentioned his family, let alone an aunt. "I'm sorry. Eli's not home right now, Dash." "I'm here to see you, actually," Judith interrupted, her gaze softening slightly. "May I come in?" Hesitantly, I stepped aside. As Judith entered, her eyes swept over the apartment, lingering on the family photos, mostly of my side of the family. "Caleb's with a sitter," I explained, gesturing to the living room. "Can I get you something to drink?" Judith shook her head, settling onto the couch. "I'll be direct, Lydia. I'm here because I'm concerned about you and my great-nephew." My defenses immediately went up. "I'm not sure I understand, Dash." "Let me ask you something," Judith cut in. "Has Eli ever told you about his parents? About his childhood?" I frowned, realizing I knew embarrassingly little. "He doesn't like to talk about it much. I know his parents passed away when he was young." Judith's laugh was sharp, devoid of humor. "Is that what he told you?" "Lydia, Eli's parents are very much alive. They live in Florida." The room seemed to tilt. That's not possible. Eli wouldn't lie about something like that. Wouldn't he?" Judith leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Lydia, I've known Eli his whole life. I love him, but I also know what he's capable of. The manipulation, the lies." As Judith spoke, painting a picture of a young Eli so at odds with the man I thought I knew, my mind raced. The unexplained absences, the secretive phone calls, the constant push for more money, it all started to take on a sinister new light. "Why are you telling me this?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. Judith's expression softened. "Because I see in you what I once saw in myself. A good person, blinded by love and charm. I let Eli manipulate me for years, costing me my business and nearly my sanity. I can't stand by and watch it happen to you and that sweet boy of yours." She reached into her bag, pulling out a file. This contains records of Eli's past, financial documents, police reports, testimonies from people he's taken advantage of. I'm not asking you to believe me outright. Just look into it. For Caleb's sake, if not your own. As she stood to leave, Judith paused at the door. Lydia, you seem like a strong woman. Don't let Eli dim your light. You and Caleb deserve better. After she left, I sat frozen on the couch, the file unopened on my lap. Part of me wanted to throw it away, to cling to the image of Eli I'd built up over the years. But a small voice, one that sounded suspiciously like my father's, urged me to look. With trembling hands, I opened the file. As I read, tears began to fall. Bank statements showing large, unexplained withdrawals. A restraining order from an ex-girlfriend. A series of jobs, each ending abruptly under suspicious circumstances. It was like watching a house of cards collapse. Every document, every testimony, chipped away at the foundation of my marriage. The Eli I thought I knew was crumbling before my eyes, replaced by a stranger I wasn't sure I'd ever truly known. As I heard Eli's key in the lock, I quickly hid the file. My heart raced as he walked in, his easy smile so familiar yet suddenly alien. Hey babe, he called out. Everything okay? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile, my mind reeling. Everything's fine. I lied, realizing with a sickening clarity that I was becoming as adept at deception as he was. Just a long day. As Eli chatted about his day, I watched him with new eyes, wondering how much of what he said was truth and how much was carefully crafted fiction. One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same again. The weight of Judith's revelations hung heavy on my shoulders as I navigated the following weeks. Every interaction with Eli felt like a carefully choreographed dance, each step measured to hide my growing suspicions. I found myself scrutinizing his every word, searching for the lies I now suspected lurked beneath the surface. One rainy Tuesday, as I was sorting through some of Eli's old papers in search of a missing tax document, I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. It was a bank statement for an account I'd never seen before, showing regular transfers to someone named Hannah. My hands trembled as I dug deeper, uncovering more statements, text messages, and even a few photos. The woman in the pictures was young, probably in her mid-20s, with a radiant smile that twisted my stomach into knots. In one photo, Eli's arm was draped casually around her waist, his expression more carefree than I'd seen in years. I felt like I was going to be sick. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. The late nights at work, the mysterious phone calls, the sudden business trips. It had all been a lie. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Eli. Working late tonight. Don't wait up. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't sit idly by any longer. With a determination I hadn't felt in years, I gathered the evidence, called our neighbor to watch Caleb, and headed to Eli's office. The sleek high-rise loomed before me, a monument to the life Eli had always wanted. I marched past the security desk, my heart pounding as the elevator climbed to the 20th floor. As I approached Eli's office, I heard laughter, his unmistakable chuckle mingled with a woman's lilting giggle. I burst through the door without knocking. Eli and a young woman, Hannah, I presumed, sprang apart, their faces a mixture of shock and guilt. Lydia, Eli exclaimed, his charm kicking in even as panic flashed in his eyes. What are you doing here? Is everything okay? I stood there, trembling with rage and hurt. Is everything okay? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper.
No, Eli.
Everything is most definitely not okay. Hannah looked between us, confusion evident on her face. Eli, what's going on? Who is this? I turned to her, my heart breaking for this woman who, like me, had fallen for Eli's lies. I'm his wife, I said softly, and the mother of his child. The color drained from Hannah's face. She turned to Eli, her voice shaking. You're married? You have a kid? You told me you were divorced. Eli's mask of charm slipped, revealing a desperation I'd never seen before. Lydia, Hannah, I can explain everything. This isn't what it looks like, dash. Save it. I cut him off, tossing the stack of evidence onto his desk. I know everything, Eli. The affair, the secret bank account, the lies about your family. It's over. As the full weight of his deception crashed down around us, I felt a strange sense of calm. I turned to Hannah, who looked shell-shocked. I'm sorry you got caught up in this. You deserve better. With that, I walked out, leaving Eli's stammering excuses behind me. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt as though I could breathe freely for the first time in years. My phone buzzed again, a text from Judith. How are you holding up? I took a deep breath, realizing I'd been unconsciously heading towards the bus station that would take me back to the farm. Back home. I'm okay. I typed back. I think it's time for a fresh start. As the city lights faded behind me, I thought of Caleb, of the farm, of the life I'd left behind. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hope stirring in my chest. The betrayal had been unveiled, but with it came a chance for redemption, not for Eli, but for myself. It was time to reclaim the strength I'd forgotten I had, to build a life of integrity for Caleb and for the memory of my parents. As the familiar countryside began to appear outside the bus window, I made a silent vow. This was the end of Lydia, the naive city wife, and the beginning of a new chapter, one written on my own terms. The farmhouse kitchen, once a sanctuary of warmth and comfort, now felt like a battleground. I stood at the counter, my knuckles white as I gripped its edge, steeling myself for the confrontation I knew was coming. The screen door creaked open, and Eli's footsteps echoed through the house. Lydia, he called out, his voice a mixture of confusion and irritation. What the hell is going on? Why are my things packed? I turned to face him, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. I think you know why, Eli. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the suitcases by the door, the papers spread across the table. For a moment, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes before his familiar mask of charm slid into place. Honey, whatever you think is happening, I can explain, he said, taking a step towards me with his hands raised placatingly. I held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. Don't you dare try to charm your way out of this. I know everything, Eli. The affair, the lies about your family, the plans for my inheritance. His facade cracked, revealing a coldness I'd never seen before. So what if I did? You were so caught up in your precious farm and your small-town values that you couldn't see the bigger picture. I was trying to give us a better life. A better life? I scoffed, anger rising in my chest. By lying to me? By cheating on me? By trying to steal my parents' legacy? Eli's eyes narrowed. That farm is a goldmine, Lydia. Do you have any idea how much we could get for that land? But you're too sentimental to see it. I was doing this for us, for our future. No, Eli, I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. You were doing this for yourself. You always have been. He laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound that sent chills down my spine. And what are you going to do about it? You're nothing without me, Lydia. You think you can run this farm on your own? Raise Caleb by yourself? You'll come crawling back within a month. His words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let him see how much they hurt. Instead, I straightened my spine, channeling every ounce of strength my parents had instilled in me. I'd rather struggle on my own than live another day in a lie, I said, my voice low but firm. You're leaving, Eli.
Today.
And you're not taking a cent of my inheritance with you. For a moment, I saw a raw fury flash in his eyes, and I tensed, ready for him to lash out. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating look that was almost worse. You'll regret this, Lydia, he said, his voice eerily calm. You have no idea what I'm capable of. No, Eli, I replied, meeting his gaze unflinchingly. You have no idea what I'm capable of. I'm not the naive farm girl you married anymore. I'm my father's daughter, and I will fight for what's mine. We stood there, locked in a silent battle of wills, the air thick with unspoken threats and shattered dreams. Finally, Eli broke eye contact, grabbing his suitcases with a sneer. "This isn't over," he spat as he headed for the door. "Yes, it is," I said quietly, more to myself than to him. As the door slammed behind him, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The confrontation I dreaded for so long was over, and I was still standing. Tears pricked at my eyes, a mix of relief, fear, and determination. I walked to the window, watching Eli's car disappear down the long driveway. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the fields, reminding me of all the sunsets I'd watched with my parents from this very spot. "I won't let you down," I whispered, placing a hand on my stomach where our second child, unknown to Eli, was growing. "Any of you." As the last rays of sunlight faded, I turned away from the window, my mind already racing with plans. The road ahead would be hard, but for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The confrontation with Eli hadn't broken me. It had awakened a strength I'd forgotten I possessed. Tomorrow, I would begin the fight to save my farm, to build a future for my children, and to reclaim the woman I was always meant to be. The morning after Eli's departure, I stood on the porch of my childhood home, surveying the fields that stretched out before me. The weight of responsibility settled on my shoulders, but for the first time in years, I felt a spark of excitement ignite within me. My phone buzzed, and I saw Judith's name flash across the screen. "Are you ready?" her text read. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the challenge ahead. "As I'll ever be," I replied. An hour later, Judith's sleek car pulled up the gravel driveway. She stepped out, looking every inch the successful businesswoman in her tailored suit. But her eyes were kind as she approached me. "Lydia," she said, embracing me warmly, "I'm proud of you for taking this step." We settled at the kitchen table, the same one where my parents had taught me about crop rotations and animal husbandry. Now it was covered with financial statements, market research, and business plans. "Okay," Judith began, her tone shifting to one of focused determination. "Let's talk about turning this farm into a thriving business." For hours, we pored over the documents, discussing everything from organic certification to agritourism opportunities. Judith's business acumen combined with my intimate knowledge of the farm, creating a synergy that felt almost magical. "What about this section here?" I asked, pointing to a fallow field near the creek. "I've always thought it would be perfect for a pick-your-own-berry patch." Judith's eyes lit up. "Brilliant! That could be a major draw for families and tourists. We could even partner with local schools for educational programs." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the kitchen floor, we sat back, exhausted but exhilarated. The beginnings of a solid plan had taken shape before us. "Lydia," Judith said, her voice soft but firm, "this won't be easy. There will be long days, sleepless nights, and moments when you'll want to give up. Are you sure you're ready for this?" I looked out the window at the land that had nurtured generations of my family. I thought of Caleb, peacefully napping upstairs, and the new life growing inside me. Then I thought of Eli and his dismissive words, "You'll come crawling back within a month." A fire of determination blazed within me. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," I said, my voice steady and sure. Judith smiled, a hint of pride in her eyes. "Then let's make it happen." Over the next few weeks, the farm buzzed with activity. I threw myself into the work, relishing the feeling of dirt under my fingernails and the ache in my muscles at the end of each day. Judith's connections proved invaluable, bringing in experts to help modernize our operations while staying true to the farm's roots. One evening, as I stood in the newly planted berry patch, Caleb toddled up to me, his little hands grasping a fistful of wildflowers. "For you, Mama," he said, his face beaming with pride. I scooped him up, inhaling the sweet scent of his hair mingled with the earthy aroma of the fields. "Thank you, sweetheart," I whispered, feeling a lump form in my throat. At that moment, I heard the rumble of an approaching vehicle. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized Eli's car coming up the driveway. He stepped out, his eyes narrowing as he took in the changes to the farm. "What's all this?" he demanded, gesturing to the new signage and equipment. I set Caleb down, giving him a gentle push towards the house. This is our future, Eli, I said, my voice calm but resolute. A future that doesn't include you. Eli's face contorted with anger. You can't do this, he sputtered. You have no idea what you're doing. You'll ruin everything. I stood my ground, feeling the strength of the earth beneath my feet.
No, Eli.
I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm reclaiming my heritage, providing for our son, and building something meaningful. Something you never understood. As Eli's tirade continued, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. His words, once so powerful, now seemed hollow and desperate. I realized that I had outgrown not just Eli, but the version of myself that had allowed his manipulation for so long. Leave, Eli, I said firmly. You're not welcome here anymore. As he drove away, tires spitting gravel, I turned back to the fields, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The path forward wouldn't be easy, but with every step, I was reclaiming not just my family's legacy, but my own strength and identity. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. As darkness fell, I made my way back to the house, where Caleb waited, where new life grew within me, and where the future, bright and full of promise, beckoned. The autumn sun cast a golden glow over the fields as I stood on the porch, watching families stream into the farm for our first harvest festival. Children's laughter mingled with the scent of apple cider and freshly baked pies, a symphony of life and renewal. Mama, look! Caleb tugged at my hand, pointing excitedly at the hayride pulling away from the barn. Can we go? I smiled, ruffling his hair. Of course, sweetheart. Let's go. As we climbed aboard, I caught sight of Judith chatting with a group of investors. She gave me a subtle thumbs up, and I felt a surge of pride. In just a year, we transformed the struggling farm into a thriving agribusiness and community hub. The hayride jolted into motion, and I closed my eyes, savoring the moment. The gentle swell of my belly reminded me of the new life growing within, a sister for Caleb, and another thread in the tapestry of our future. As we rounded a bend, I spotted a familiar figure trudging up the driveway. Eli, looking disheveled and worn, his designer clothes a far cry from their former crisp perfection. I need to talk to you, he called out as we passed. I sighed, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. Meet me by the old oak in 10 minutes, I replied, my voice steady. After settling Caleb with a caramel apple and trusted employee, I made my way to the tree where Eli waited. You've done well for yourself, he said, his tone a mixture of bitterness and grudging admiration. What do you want, Eli? I asked, crossing my arms protectively over my growing belly. His eyes widened as he noticed. You're pregnant? Is it mine? I said firmly. What happens in my life is no longer your concern. Eli's shoulders sagged. Hannah left, he admitted. The money's gone. I've got nothing, Lydia. For a moment, I felt a flicker of pity. But then I remembered all the lies, the manipulation, the years of diminishing myself to fit his expectations. I'm sorry you're struggling, Eli, I said, my voice softening slightly. But you made your choices. I can't help you. But the farm, our history, he protested weakly. I shook my head. This farm, this life, it's not yours anymore. It's mine and Caleb's and this little one's, I said, resting a hand on my belly. You never understood what it meant to be part of something bigger than yourself. I'm sorry, but there's no place for you here. As if on cue, Judith appeared at my side. Is everything all right? She asked, her tone making it clear she was ready to intervene if needed. Eli's eyes darted between us, realization dawning. You too? You planned this all along, didn't you? No, Eli, I said firmly. We simply recognized our own worth and acted on it. Something you never learned to do. With a final, defeated look, Eli turned and walked away. As he disappeared down the driveway, I felt the last remnants of our shared past fade away. Judith squeezed my shoulder. You okay? I nodded, surprised to find I truly was. More than okay. I'm free. We made our way back to the festival, where Caleb ran to greet us, his face sticky with caramel. As I scooped him up, I caught sight of my reflection in a nearby window. The woman looking back at me was strong, confident, and at peace, a far cry from the naive girl who had left this farm years ago. "Mama," Caleb said, his little hands framing my face. "Are you happy?" I looked around at the thriving farm, at Judith, who had become both mentor and friend, at the community that had rallied around us. I thought of my parents and the legacy they'd left, now renewed and flourishing. And I thought of the future stretching out before us, full of possibility and hope. "Yes, my love," I said, hugging him close. "I'm very happy." As the day wound down and the last visitors departed, I stood once more on the porch. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues, a fitting end to a transformative chapter. I placed a hand on my belly, feeling a gentle kick. "Welcome to the family, little one," I whispered. "You're coming into a world of love, strength, and integrity. A world where we remember where we come from, but we're not afraid to grow beyond it." With a contented sigh, I turned and walked into the house, ready to face whatever the future might bring. The door closed behind me, not as an ending, but as the beginning of a new, authentic life, one cultivated with my own hands, nourished by the rich soil of my heritage, and blooming with the promise of tomorrow.